Ok, buongiorno a tutti ragazzi, benvenuti, bentornati su Missionari per caso. Non so che episodio sarà, il terzo, il quarto, però quello che posso dirvi è che oggi c'è con noi Maya, che ha abitato letteralmente con noi a casa nostra per 3 mesi. Maya è stata e è ancora una missionaria, con la base, nella base dove noi siamo e saremo missionari, quindi oggi parleremo in particolare con lei di giovani in missione o giovani e missione. So Maya, welcome to the podcast. Feel like usual, like home. You're the kind of person that you feel home everywhere. I mean, you look like you feel home everywhere. I know that it's not true, but it's like, yeah. And even if you say like that, just smiling is gonna be fine.
Thanks, Paulo. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And I honestly love what you and Nina are doing right now, just researching and joining the missionary world. I think you guys are brave and you're already been such missionaries. That's your lifestyle already. So I think it's exciting to just dialogue with you and talk about what we have experienced. So
it's gonna be fun. Also because, we come from a totally different country first, and environment, and also mindset, because that's what we've been talking today at lunch with Sarah. We were talking about being Christian and youth in Italy and America, how different it is. So for Italian mindset, if you are like me, 45 years old, you still like in the youth group, kind of, which is not even, but
it's just a small piece of the story. Youth group is great.
Oh yeah,
it's
but I mean, the youthness perspective, like the Italian youthness perspective and the American ones are pretty different. So for me, for us, was astonishing to see so many young people, boys and girls, like really young, 18, 19, 20 years old, being missionary. So first of all, how was your story? How did you decide to become a missionary? When? How? Why?
Well, it's a great question, because I think no matter where you are in any country, it's a risk to become a missionary, because you are deciding to live for God first and foremost, and it doesn't matter what job you're going to do or how you're going to execute it. You're living for God, and that is really scary. So I think America and Italy can be together in the fear that we do it scared together. But what actually had me decide to become a missionary was my church. When I was a kid, we had a missions-oriented church. It was a 4-square church. So I remember a lot of prayer nights, and we would have missionaries from Africa come, and they'd bring their really delicious food with curries and interesting chickens, and we would just sit and eat. And I just remember feeling this sense of home and aliveness of being around people from other cultures, that they had something and saw things about the world that I didn't know and almost could never understand or experience the way they do. But just being around them helped challenge me out of my comfort zone. So as a kid, there was a lot of culture that would come through our church, which is unique. That's not very common in all the churches in America. And then my family hosted missionaries. We had one particular missionary named Ari. He was from Nigeria, and he would come and he'd wear a cross on his shirt, and he had crazy stories. Like, he first came to America, didn't know what he was doing, and got stuck in a blizzard and a snowstorm, and out of nowhere, he's walking without a jacket through, I think it was Wisconsin, and someone just came in a car, picked him up, and said, "Hey, I'm going to take you where you need to go." And that car dropped him off at the hotel that he had a reservation at. Wow. And he didn't give that person the information or anything. And so I just remember growing up hearing these crazy stories about missionaries who would sacrifice anything. They'd go anywhere. They'd spend all their money possible just to hear God, just to follow his word. And we have lost communication with Ari, and we believe that he's been killed for his faith, because he was so bold.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah. And I think that really struck a chord with me as a young 12-year-old kid that really following God is a serious thing, and it's also an adventure. So that was the beginning story of why missions work just made an impact in my heart that I wanted to do it someday.
I mean, this starting it's was I was not expecting that. I was not ready for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the Lord sometimes um, bring you most of the time, every time actually brings you, put you in the right spot at this
Mm,
right moment, and sometimes you don't understand why, and
yeah.
then in the future you will understand why you was in that place,
Yes.
why it
It's
was a
so true.
missionary hosted in your house, and
Hmm.
how the pieces come together. Yeah,
I agree.
that's and
Well,
yeah. When you're young, it's very hard to see the try to see the entire picture, even when you're older.
yes.
But
Yeah. I just think it was a unique thing that my parents were willing to open up their house. They didn't have a lot of money, but they gave what they could and what they felt the Lord told them to missionaries. And we even had a whole family come every other summer and stay with us. And it was crazy in our house. We had like 5 extra kids
oh
in our
wow,
house for a whole summer. And I remember sitting in the trampoline with two of them, and they're looking up at the sky and they're like, we should be missionaries someday. And so we made a deal together that we would be missionaries someday. And so we just decided, and we thought it was Africa. And there was this big thing. My dad used to make this joke and say, God, send me anywhere, but don't send me to Africa. It's like, I will give my life to you, but there's just this one piece. Like, don't put me in a grass hut in the middle of nowhere with lions
yeah,
outside my door.
yeah,
And I remember as a kid thinking, I would go to Africa. I just don't want to go to corporate America, that or something where it's cold and like people aren't loving and warm and hospitable. I wanted to go where things were alive and exciting. So I think no matter what your fears are regarding missions work, give it to God because He knows your heart and He's not going to send you somewhere that doesn't line up with who you are. He's going to challenge. I mean, doing missions work in Cambodia and Cyprus and a little bit in Italy, right? I think I've been put outside my comfort zone and been put in situations I did not want to be in. But the surrender part is so important, first and foremost, that you just give it to God and say, I will go anywhere you send me, God. And He might just do that. So, but don't be afraid.
yeah.
It's not
But
necessarily going to be Africa, in a
no, of
hut
course,
necessarily.
that's yeah. It's so stereotypical. Yeah.
Yeah.
To think about mission and going to the other side of the planet, possibly like a poor country like Africa or South America, some part of South America
Yeah.
or Asia or that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very common for people when you talk about mission to they think about that, and I used to do
Yeah.
that as well. So but mission is
Yeah.
much more. So that's what we are like discovering, it's like it's
Yeah.
mission, it's everywhere. So I like your father saying don't send
Yes.
me to Africa. You don't need to. I mean, if the Lord, it's yeah, it. I think listen to the prayer. So yeah,
Yeah.
you don't need to go to Africa to be missionary first of all. But if you want to, and if He calls you to go, Africa can be an option
Yeah.
as well. But yeah.
Just
But how you decide? I mean, how did you decide to when and how you decided to go? How it
it's gonna
happened?
happen. Well, it's a bit of a story, so I'd have to tell you my whole life story, but I won't. But I'll tell you just the moments right before that was the catalyst. I think I had a difficult time in high school, and I didn't enjoy schoolwork, and I did everything I could to be involved with friends, and I did theater on the side, and I was over exhausted. I was working way too hard. And when I got to college, I met these two twin girls they did their discipleship training school with YWAM in New Zealand and Australia. And they came to our school really on fire for God. And they hosted a worship night, and my roommate went to it, and they prayed for her heart palpitations. And she came back, and I had gone to the doctor's appointments. I knew her heart palpitations. So I felt her heart, and it was totally a normal heartbeat. And I'm like, what's going on here? Who are these people? And it reminded me of the missionaries that I knew of growing up as a kid. I'm like calling my mom, I'm like, Mom, there's like real people who are following Jesus, like fully sold out for Jesus, and they're here on my campus. And my mom's like, great, go for it, go talk to them, you know? So at that time, I was really wrestling with my faith. I wanted to like rebel against the church and tell the church all the things they're doing wrong and how they're not following the true Jesus. And so that was just my young self trying to find my own identity, my own voice, and not understanding the full picture that God is at work in every church, in every culture, in every unique way. But that desire to find the real Jesus that the rest of the world didn't know necessarily helped me encounter how God is in so many places. So that was the beginning. I met these twins from YWAM, and they told me about it and their experience of doing a discipleship school. And I thought, you know, I love college. It's been really great being in university and studying, but I'm just working and I have no purpose or goal in my work. All I'm doing is working. And so many friends of mine were saying they will travel, they'll do things after university so that way they can just get it done. And I think I hit that point when I was like, there's no point in working really hard if there's no direction in that work. So I decided to take a gap year or gap semester and I applied for YWAM. And I looked at the map. There's like hundreds and hundreds of bases around the world. And I wanted to stick with an English speaking base because I was terrified of being outside my comfort zone. So I was looking at Hawaii and places in America and England, and nothing sat right with me. So I think the Lord was beginning to speak to my heart and show me how to hear his voice. And that discernment was starting to pick up because I was opening myself up saying, God, I want to hear from you and I want to follow you. So he started shutting doors with different campuses I was applying or looking at. And then one night I was so frustrated. I was like, God, please show me the place you want me to go. And so I felt this nudge in my spirit saying, go look at the map. So I pulled up the YWAM map and I just felt drawn to the south of France, which I didn't want to go to France because I was terrified of French people and I didn't speak French.
Terrified of French people.
Yeah. I would go to Africa, but maybe not France, you know? Yeah, and I clicked on the campus and it was about life around the table. And it talked about how Jesus met people at the table, and that's where his healing ministry and identity forming began, was face to face with people who are outcasts or unwanted. And that's where like warmth and community and family started. And I thought, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I applied for that school, and Chris and Christina were the school leaders at the time. And they happened to live in Colorado, or their home base is in Colorado. So they were visiting family. And so I got to meet them in person after I sent in my application. And it just, God lined up all the dots and made the way very clear. So I think for me, it was very clear because I just said, God, show me the way. And I surrendered so much. But sometimes God isn't that clear with me. Sometimes he's like, he wants me to step out and take a leap of faith, even if I don't know what's going to happen. But joining YWAM at that moment, doing my DTS, was very clear and very life-changing. I loved every minute of it. So.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that. Because for me it's easy because I saw the result of it. So the end of the story already. No, not the end. This part of the story. So the end of that part. But yeah, and yeah. But my question is like, yeah. So you have a clear like path to follow. So let's go and do DTS, and you move to the like. To the French, to the bad French people, even if you didn't want to. But What was the most like which challenges did you have during DTS? Like being missionary in people's mind, also in Christian people mind, it's so hard to have a clear picture of what it means to be missionary, and even more what it means to be like young, like literally young, 20 years old, uh, in mission. So for us, we are facing so many different challenges that we didn't expect to face because we are 45. We thought, okay, I mean, our life is already more or less like defined, but no, we discovered that it's not. So I think on every age you have different challenges, but what were which challenges did you
Yeah.
have to face?
That's okay. I remember picturing going to France, and I thought of it being like a field, like with cows in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of imagined someone with like an apron, all I knew about France was
Nice.
really movies. And it was so much more interesting and diverse and beautiful than I imagined. But the challenge was that fear part of all the scenarios in my head of what if I miss the train? What if I don't speak the language? How do I get there? So the nice thing is the people in YWAM gave me all the directions and where to go step by step, how to do it. But it was my first time really going somewhere like
Leaving the
alone, figuring
country.
it out, leaving the country. Yeah. So I'd say as I think I was 20 years old, um, it was a big step of faith. And I remember just wanting to do it. It was like I had been planning so long, and people were like, "How do you feel about it?" And I'm like, "Just get it over with." It's like I'm terrified but excited, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. I just want to do it. So when I got there, I was meeting people I'd never met before. I met people who struggled with the English language, so I couldn't connect all the way. And sometimes there were moments of feeling alone because nothing felt familiar around me. And yeah, I think pushing through that initial part was worth it because it's just uncomfortable with going in a new environment in a new culture, no matter where you go or how old you are. But I started to get used to it and realize, wow, people are really kind and they're not as terrifying as I thought they were. And I started making good friends. And I met Tess, who's from Sweden, while I was in France, and she became a lifelong friend. So I have a story about her at some point. I'll definitely share.
Yeah,
Um,
you can right now if you
but
want.
yeah, okay. So I remember um, Tess was fun because she wanted to pursue Jesus in an artistic way. So we would do these prophetic or just these art nights where we would just sit with God and we would just say, okay, God, if you want to show us something, then we'll write it down or we'll paint it or play music or even dance. We just decided to practice things together. And we were like, there's no judgment. We looked each other in the eyes. We're like, if you say something crazy or we know that wasn't God, it's okay. You can just do it. Go for it anyways. So we were really young, just trying to hear God's voice and learn and practice. And I think that's the risk taking part that was so freeing with someone like Tess is just to make space and say, take a risk. And if it's wrong, it's okay. We're just going to see if God speaks to us. And
Oh yeah.
it ended up being beautiful things like um, we would paint a sunset or an orange and we'd write a Bible verse that goes with it. And it spoke so much to us in that moment, in that season that we were in. So fast forward, 3 months later, after doing those nights, we were in Cyprus, and there were refugees in Cyprus that we did a bit of work with. And there's this tent, what do you call that? Like a farmer's market in a way,
Mm-hmm.
of tents lined up down the street right by the beach in Cyprus. And there were some YWAM contacts we found there, and they were doing something called spiritual art. So
Oh
apparently
wow.
in Cyprus, spiritual art is like to them they think it's like palm reading or they think you're going to get like your fortune told. So that was kind of the idea is they were trying to attract people like that, but instead of reading their fortune or reading their palm, they were just blessing them with the truth and love of Jesus. So it ended up being perfect. Hess and I sat in that tent and we got to join in with those YWAMers. And as someone would come in the tent, we would just say, hey, we're going to paint something for you and we're just going to see if God wants to speak to you. So we would pray and we'd get like a impression or a picture in our heads. And I remember one particular, for a woman, I got a picture of a bird flying freely in the air. So I painted that bird and I found a Bible verse on my phone really quick that kind of went with it. And I felt God's peace so much, and I wrote it down and I gave it to her, and she was really touched and said, "Thank you so much." And she got to take that piece of artwork with her. Then this man comes in a wheelchair, and in my head, this time I'm seeking miracles. Like I'm just there. Really, I was at YWAM because I wanted to see miracles happen. So I'm like, God, let this be the moment we see that guy walk out of that wheelchair. Spoiler alert, he did not walk out of the wheelchair, but he did have an encounter with God. Um, and he comes in, and the YWAM friends we were working with had met him before, and they start debating with apologetics with him, which apologetics just means like defending the faith. So they go back and forth about atheism, science versus creationism and Christianity and all this stuff. They're just debating and debating, and this man is getting frustrated and angry. And Tess just leans over to me and she's like, "Do you think I could just go over there and just pray for him?" And I'm like, "Do it, just go." Interrupt what they're talking about and just go pray for him. And so she's had this gleam in her eye. She was really joyful and bold, and she just walked up and she said, "Sorry to interrupt everybody," but she just looked at the man. She's like, "Do you mind if I just pray for you and share God's love with you?" And he stopped and he was confused and said, "Okay, sure." So she put her hand on his back and prayed for him. And she tried to pray for him to like stand up and walk, but the Lord just gave her words of love and kindness and saying who you are is seen by God. And he just starts weeping and crying and crying and crying. He said he felt so much warmth wash over his whole body. And then he just like looked up again and he said, "Thank you." And then he just turned around and rolled away. And the missionary friends we were working with were just so in awe. They were like, "That was awesome." But then they went back to the debate and they said, "Okay, remember how we debated this way and that way?" And so I think I admired Tess a lot in that moment. It was so easy to get caught up in the argumentation of what was happening with the person instead of seeing them as a beloved child of God and just meeting them where they're at. Of course, that man came in debating, but it's not about the debate in the end. It was just about loving that person. So you never know what can happen.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I mean, think about Tess not doing that. Like, you know, so many times we're stuck in that. Like we don't, because it's like, because when you don't know exactly who you are for God, in God, through God, it's like you lose a little bit your boldness. You know that you need to do something for somebody, in this case, for example, just to pray, but you don't do it because you're afraid of it. I think as a young person, even when you're older is the same, but as a young person, even more, because it's like you think you have so many things to lose. You think you have so many people that can judge you, that can tell you who you are or who you not are. And sometimes you miss the goal, you miss the appointment, the divine appointment with God because of that. And that's beautiful to listen to the story, because Taz was like, "I don't care what you're debating. I just let me do what God is telling me to do right now." So and
she set out with a goal. She wanted to see that man walk out of that wheelchair, but she stayed surrendered and was like, "Okay, God, what do you want to say?" So she just kept speaking life and identity over him. And that's always what God wants to do. It's never about the miracle itself. It's always about restoring relationship back with God, whatever that looks like. So it was beautiful.
Yeah. So how is it to ministry with the beauty, I think these are the beauties. Like, how is to ministry with young people? Like, I can totally see like the difficulties, because of course I can just, guys, put yourself in Maya's place, like being young, 20 years old, first time, like out of the country in a new place, you don't know anybody, you don't speak French, you have to deal with it. So you're gonna be, I mean, maybe the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks is only excitement, and then the worst of you come out. It's like, because you're
Yes.
there is so much stress on you, like so many things to deal with. So I can imagine the difficulties on being in a place of
Yes.
uncomfortableness, kind of situation. But I'm sure that also you experience beautiful like things because you are with young people. When you are young, like
Yeah.
literally 20 years old, everything is like amplified. The good and the bad is like everything, it's very good or very bad. There is nothing in
Yeah.
between sometimes.
Yeah.
So just give me a glimpse of that. Like,
I would say I definitely didn't know exactly who I was. I think that's just normal for being 20 something, is that's the time to figure out who you are. So I thought that my identity was life around the table at that moment, because that was a value that God was teaching me. So I'm just exploring this whole world. So I thought I was made for just tables, just to set the table and let people come together and meet each other. That was my whole purpose. But that's just one piece of the value God had, that I needed to learn these different values. So every time I was put in a new situation that was stressful or different or exciting or anything like that, it was God teaching me another value, and He kept having to bring me back. It's like, this is what I live for, even if it's preaching the gospel on the streets, evangelism. I'm like, this is all we're supposed to be doing at all times, constantly. We need to be sharing the gospel with every
oh
person that
yeah,
we meet. So I put my identity in that, and God had to keep pulling me back. I had moments of, why isn't this working? Why do I feel so hollow inside? What's God, aren't, like, I got angry at God. There were times when I would evangelize or pray for somebody, and it wouldn't work. And I'm like, this is why you created me, God. So why aren't you showing up?
yeah.
And it's because He was saying it's always about Him and relationship with Him. I was created to be with Him. I wasn't created just to do a task. And those tasks I should learn because they're great values to have, but they're not my core identity. So, yeah. And then I guess another stress of being younger was like, and I think it doesn't get necessarily easier as you get older, but finances was huge.
Oh,
Of how do I prepare to get there, and how do I afford to travel?
oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
No, that
I
never
mean, you get
ends.
it. I thought you could
Unfortunately.
just hit a certain age and then money just came to you, right? It just
Yeah, of
shows
course.
up at your door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but being
No.
young is like, yeah, it's different for sure. You have a different approach to that. It's like, yeah, but you're so true. I mean, like, find yourself in God, find who you are. That's what I meant when I was saying, like, when you're 20 years old, it's everything is very good or very bad, no? Or
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you receive something from God, it's like the only thing that you focus on for 3 months or something, because you think that there
Yes.
is nothing else outside of it. But
Exactly.
yeah, but it's
And
you
it's a
never.
beautiful
Oh
process.
yeah, it is beautiful. It is beautiful, but it's like, yeah, the frustration with God, the fighting with God is like when you don't feel ready for something. It's like so many young people don't go through, or sometimes also, yeah, it's not, yeah, but most of the time it's like they don't go through because they don't feel ready for something. You think
Hmm.
so many young people, I'm dealing with young people from now, I don't know, 15 years or something. People, like young people, they think you have certain requirement to be missionary. Like,
Yeah.
be a missionary is like a superpower for somebody. It's like,
Right.
you have to be,
You've
yeah,
graduated. You're a good Christian. You follow God, you
yeah.
know.
But it's not
Yeah, I
like
was not
that.
like that.
Yeah.
No.
It's through experience. I think mission can be a way to grow up in God and to find out who you are for God and in
Yep.
God. And it's a tool,
Yeah.
can be a tool.
Yeah. I actually wrote down this quote that has spoken to me before is from A.W. Tozer. He said, "Let every man abide in the calling where he is called, and his work will be as sacred as the work of the ministry. It is not what a man does that determines whether his work is sacred or secular. It is how or why he does it." So that
Oh,
quote stuck
yeah.
out to me because it's not about what a man does that says
Is the
you're doing
why.
sacred work. It's the
Is the
why.
why. This is incredible because literally, like this morning, I was reading exactly the same thing on a different book, which is Call to Create. Call to Create, and
Wow.
I'm reading it back because I already read it, but it's like because of the teaching I'm preparing, I'm reading it back, and yeah, it's not a matter of it's not a matter of like be creative and be who you are and
Mm-hmm.
do what God tells you to do. Is not about if or how or when. It's about
Yeah.
why. Are you doing for the right
Yes.
reason for him or for
Mm-hmm.
yourself or the others? That
Yeah,
makes a huge difference.
it does. And when I came back from my 6 months of discipleship training school, I came back and continued my degree. So that would be considered secular, right? So the sacred thing would be doing missions work in France and Cyprus. The secular thing would be going back home and getting your degree. But actually, that's not at all what God is saying or teaching, is that when I had vision of who I was able to complete my degree. It wasn't easy. It didn't make it like, oh, it's so much easier now and I'm having so much fun with it. It was still hard, but I had purpose behind the hardship, so it made it worth it. Whereas before, when I started my degree, I just didn't like it and it was hard and I had no direction, so it's easier to be hopeless. But when you
Yeah.
have purpose, you can do hard things. You could go to school for 10, 20 years even. I hope not. Hope that never happens to you.
But I mean
But
that's your superpower, young people.
yeah.
That's your superpower. You can be like missionaries at school. It's
Yeah.
so common to separate like the exactly what you were saying right now, like the secular work and the missionary work, it's like,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
can be the same thing because when you know the why,
Exactly.
when you know who you are, what you are
Yep.
called to by God, there is nothing secular. Everything
Exactly.
can be for God, actually, even the thing that you don't like so much, but you can see like God move through that. You
And when
have,
you keep your eyes on God,
yeah,
he's just going to take you step by step and he's not going to let you go. He's going to say, here's the next thing. If you stop hearing God's voice, this is a why way I'm teaching that changed my life. If you stop knowing God's direction, go back to the last time you heard him and sit with him in it and allow him to unfold that whole story, because maybe there's something he's showing you, but he wants to walk in relationship with you. He's not just giving you the information.
oh yeah,
So it can take so much time, and it's so frustrating to let God just sit with you and unpack things, but it's really your heart and your identity that he's after and not getting the task done. So
oh yeah.
that
What?
that's
Yeah, you
really
get lost
important.
in it. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go for too much time by yourself, you will feel in a place. You will find yourself in a place where you think you're not hearing the voice of God anymore. You think
Mm.
he let you alone somehow. I don't know. It's like you feel
Oh
abandoned
yeah.
from God, but it's not
Yeah.
about him. It's about us. It's like so many times
Hmm.
we fall in. That's the main things that I'm learning right now. It's like I'm realizing how much control I had over my life before being like what I am right now. It's like you don't realize as a Christian how much you control of your life, how many
Yeah.
things you don't give to God. You don't let God get in that
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
when you do that, everything's changed. It's like, what? Why I didn't do it before? But we are so used to have control, to
It
control,
exactly.
and yeah, it's
It's because
like,
we let these like big fears in our heads grow. So we think that if we can control it, then therefore it won't happen. But it's not about those things. Like for my dad, it was don't send me to Africa, right?
yeah,
Or for me, I didn't want to go to Italy, actually. I didn't want to do mission work in Italy. After spending 1 month there, I was like, I think I'd rather go to Cyprus where there's refugees everywhere and I see the direct impact that I'm
yeah,
doing. Whereas in Italy's a little bit like being in America where you learn to live within the community and it's the small things that start building
oh
up
yeah,
over time. It really matters. And so my fears, God did have me face those fears. So I think two things I like to say is that one is release those things like of giving up control. Like let's say you don't leave your house because you're afraid of getting in a car accident, right? So you always stay home. Well, maybe God's asking you to go outside and go drive your car. But let's say the worst thing does happen and you do get in a car accident, you're still okay. God has you because you belong to Him. So you have to release that. Almost it's an idol of your heart to say, that fear of mine, I'm not going to release control because of that fear I have. But really, you're safe because the creator of the universe is going to take you where you need to go. So even if God took my dad to Africa, I know he would be okay. So far, my dad has totally released that and he would go if really God told him to. He's gone to Mexico. He's done some mission work. But it's not about the fear. It's about keeping your eyes on God. And
yeah,
and then actually when I faced my fears, like going to Italy to do missions work, I realized, wow, I can do hard things. I can do the things I didn't want to do. And it gave me more confidence to continue walking with God, to do things that I was afraid of. So that control is really just pride, and I still am working through it.
oh
So
yeah.
many areas.
It's easy to fall in control because it's the easiest things to do. Like when you know what's happening, yeah, you can prepare for it. You think you can prepare for it. You can be ready for, and it's like that's human being, like
Yeah.
having the routine, having, and I like I think about myself as a non like repetitive. I get bored of routines normally, but and so I thought I was not having so much control of my life because of that. But then, oh yeah, I did have a lot of control, and I still have a lot of control of my life. Trying to, we get
Yeah.
back. We were talking, yeah, so many times about that, about this with Nina in the last 2 months or 3 months.
Mm,
How much control we have, yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, but it's beautiful. So, how do you think that?
It's a constant act of surrender. Like you
Yeah,
think you give it all up for God, you did it that one time, and now you get to kind of get back in the rhythm, but it's actually a cycle with God
yeah.
of always surrendering to Him and living a life like that.
Yeah, that's what I say every time, all the time. It's like if you don't have like a daily or literally relationship with God, it's gonna be hard. You will
Yeah.
fall back in control, and
Hmm.
that's my piece of advice to everybody. It's an easy one, very hard to apply, but easy one, life changing for me. It's like we are not very good in that task. I mean,
Yeah. No.
we're not made for that. I think we're not made for that. So he is much better than us having control of on our life.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
But
but
he always like gets to another layer with me. Like I think that I get it here. I'm like, I've
yeah,
given up so much control to you, God, here. And then he'll start to just dig deeper into the next thing. Even like the music I listen to, or lately it's just been making space to read a book or invite God into small things. He's like, "Hey, when you're watching that TV show, invite me into it." I'm like, "Why?" Why would I? You know?
Do you like
And
TV shows? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I do. I do. I like TV shows and movies. I love stories, so anything. But I realize that it's not about entertainment. I mean, it can be. There's moments God's like, yeah, just rest, and I'm just talking to him about it. Like, I just need to watch this movie and just not think about the world or the problems.
Yeah.
But there are times when I think mostly God just wants to be there with me, and
Yeah.
it can be anything you're doing with your life. So I'm still
And
learning it.
it's very inspiring. That's why, for me, it's easy to do that because that's a very natural thing for me to do, to invite God, and because that's my creative process. So when I watch a movie, Nina get upset all the time because I'm like focusing on so many different things on the movie. Sometimes I miss like the story a little bit, but I'm getting
The lighting
inspired.
and the
Yeah, but I get
music
inspired
and
by details, and sometimes I take notes, and people think I'm crazy. Not every time, all the time, but it's like sometimes I watch a movie and I take notes, not because they're
yeah.
not notes about the movie, but it's things that comes in my mind in that moment through that movie, and I sometimes use it for preaching or for a teaching or just for myself, and it's
Yeah.
that's my crazy mind. It works like that. So
And it looks like that for you, and I think I'm the same way, but I care more about music and like the sound of, like, if the audio isn't good in the movie, I don't
oh
like listening to it. If it's too scary or wait, I don't know. It's just I don't enjoy it. And I think I see my world that way. I see the way the world feels and looks, and there's always like a soundtrack playing in the back of something, and I'm always inspired by that. So I realize like I can invite God into that space too, just what
yeah.
you're saying. It's just everyone's different in it, and we're all creative.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Also people that don't think they are, but yeah.
They are.
That's another
They are.
topic. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so to wrap it up, I want to ask you like the last kind of question. Let's call it like that, even if it's not. But how do
Yeah.
you think the youth can impact this world through missions, or through missions actually?
I think young people are the perfect person, the perfect vessel for the gospel because they're moldable. And honestly, I think young people are more honest about their fears and their struggles, and they're willing to be shaped by it. So when you see young people put themselves out there and make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes. So that's the risk taking that God is calling people to do, to go out and share the gospel. So it's actually everybody has the same ability, the same voice, the same commission from God. It's just, I think there's something special that God's doing to inspire young people to grow up to be those adults that are changing the world for Christ and taking risks and being bold. But the thing is, we do it afraid. And so I think young people are zealous and shapeable, moldable, and risk takers. It just, yeah, when you see a young person on fire for God, it inspires anybody. It's like seeing, like, when my nephew tells me like Jesus loves you. It's just like, I'm not saying a young person is just like a 5-year-old. It's cute like that, but I just mean that when you see someone who's purely, truly just speaking truth and loving someone well, no matter whether they're qualified or smart or strong, they're just doing it out of their own, even brokenness. It inspires other people. Like, wait, if that person can do it, maybe I can do it. So young people are just unexpected. You don't respect them normally. Like, you would respect that higher level
Yeah.
professor, or, but a young person, to that's what I think Jesus wants to speak through. So I don't think there's like magic pixie dust on a young person versus an old person. I just think they're more shapeable and taking risks. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like the people don't think that don't think about what young people experience can give to the others. So that's what we learned last year doing a small group at the base. and having like so many young people, like DTS students or people that coming down in outreach for a while, sharing their stories, their experiences with like a bunch of old people was
That's so awesome.
so inspiring for me and for everybody. Everybody was
Oh,
like your mouth, it cannot be shut. It's like you open up your mouth, like not believing that at 19 years old can tell you something so deep out of that he learned or she learned out of an experience, like a real
yeah,
life
yeah,
Christian experience. And they are, you're right, they have this ability to talk about their brokenness in a way that it's like breathtaking. They don't sometimes when you get there, when you let the Lord work with you on your brokenness, you can share it and make it like effective for the others in a
yeah,
way that is not even believable. So many times I find older people struggle with that, like to say I'm broke. Even if I'm
exactly.
55 or 60 years old, I'm broke, and
Yep,
that's okay. You know,
yep,
we
exactly.
we don't feel like you. Yeah, today on
Yeah,
Sarah's birthday, one of the question was, what kind of advice for us older than 28? Sarah was asking us, give me like a piece of advice that you learned when you was 28 years old. And was so funny. I mean, but also
you didn't
interesting.
have
But
to.
you know, when you are 45, 40, 45, 50, 55, you think that
Yeah,
you cannot say something. You have to be like uh, more or less safe speaking. You're supposed to be
yes,
not broke. You know, you're supposed to
exactly.
have it figured it out. Like you're supposed to know
Yeah,
how life works, how it should be. You're supposed to be the one that's what the word tells you, but that's not
right.
true. You
Not at
can,
all.
and
But
listening.
that's the difference of like having hope versus being hopeless. Because if you're
Yeah,
hopeless and you're talking about your problems, then people who are also hopeless get hopeless too. And then they just deal with your problems and they get
yeah,
insecure. So I think that's also a thing, a challenge that I think young people can bring to the next generation is saying, bring your problems, but bring hope to it too. So that way, it's actually not a bad thing to talk about
no,
your vulnerable things that you're struggling with. But if you have hope in it, then you can talk freely and someone might be able to speak life into it
yeah,
and there's a solution, you know?
yeah. It's so for somebody like me who had been working with youth for many years, it's like sometimes it's so frustrating to work with young people because it's like it's tough. It's like it's a lot, it requires a lot of effort and a lot of being there and a lot of repetitiveness. How do you say that?
Yes.
And
Repetitiveness. Yeah.
yeah, but at the end of it, there is something so special in seeing a young person growing up and seeing like your time spent with them because God asks you to do that and see the fruits. It's like put a smile on your face that is different from any other smile that you can have. Like
Yeah.
working with young
Yeah.
people can be frustrating for sure, but can be
Yes.
one of the most beautiful
Mm.
feelings and seeing that you can have in your life. It's like, yeah, young people are powerful. Young people can make this world change, literally. And I see that. I mean, I
In
see that happen. So it's,
yeah.
yeah.
In your life, Paulo, when have you seen someone like, because you've worked with young people for 15 years, so you have watched them go from the crazy annoying kid that you had to repeat things to 10 times,
Oh, yeah.
or you've seen it and then they become an adult. So do you have an example or
Oh, yeah. I have so many. I can give you the first one that comes in my mind is Victor. Victor is our like worship leader in church. And oh man, I'm not gonna go in details, but I cannot even believe who he is now, right now. Or Simone, which is Simon is the one that takes care about evangelistic stuff in church with me. And yeah, to see them right now, it's like, yeah, when I think back,
Wow.
I smile. It's like, I remember 15, 12 years old, 10 years old, 10 years ago, sorry, or 12 years ago, spending so much time with them, trying to, why you do that? Why are you doing that? Why you keep doing that? That's not good for you. It's like, and you get upset with it. And then after 1 month, they fall in the same things again and again and again. And it's so hard sometimes to invest in young people because of that, because you
Yeah.
don't see, you
Yeah.
see the right now, you don't see the future. But if you push yourself to see in the future, to look at the future, to envision what they can be, the potential in them, then maybe sometimes you're lucky enough to see them to still in their life after 15 years or 12 years, like me with Victor, for example, or Marika, or so many young people that from the church, and now you love them for who they are.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I love them also at the time, but it's a different kind of, they make you smile. I don't know. It's a very unique feeling. It's like you just have to love them. It's like, yeah, and to love
And you
them.
make space. You
Yeah,
just made space to talk to them. And I bet there were things you could have done that it would have been a lot faster if you had done it or had found someone older to do that job. But you put a young person on it who had to
yeah.
learn for 3-4 weeks and
Oh
make a
yeah.
million mistakes. But you invested in them. And
Yeah,
I had so many people do that for me. So
yeah,
it
that's what
really
I
mattered.
learned the most from my pastor. I think is very unique in Italy, and he always had been investing in young people, even when like somebody like me who is younger than him. It's like he says, let's put this person in charge of this project, and I'm like, sure? Are you sure? I mean, it's not ready. She's not ready. I know.
Yeah.
Let's put him in charge. I'm like, okay. And
Yeah,
it is powerful. It is very
it
powerful
is.
to let the young people be young, make
Yeah.
mistake, but evolve and see the potential like blossom.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and that's the other thing for anyone who's thinking about joining the mission field of any kind, and specifically if you're thinking of joining YWAM, like I realized that it's not a magic place. It's not gonna just be the best thing ever and it's so exciting all the time. It's actually that you're working with young people, and then for me I had people who are just a few steps older than me, so they were just a few steps down the road, but they taught me so much because they were so close to where I was, but they had already overcome some of the things I was going through, and they could
oh yeah.
directly speak into that. And it's actually that it's messy to put young people
Oh yeah.
in leadership positions, and there you lose money, you make mistakes, but actually it can be really the most profound way to grow in who God has in your identity. So it's
Yeah.
not always good. It's not always more efficient to put a young person
No, for
in a
sure.
leadership position.
Yeah, but sometimes having somebody that believes in you and sees what God is doing in your life as a young person, and knowing that you're not perfect for that and you're gonna make mistakes and
Hmm.
stuff like that, but listening to the voice of God saying he's gonna be a ministry of God, so you have
Yeah.
to just let him do what he has to do. The mistakes that he
Yeah.
has to make and stuff like that, it's gonna be fine. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's powerful. So
It
yeah.
is. It is. Wow.
There you
Well,
go, Maya.
this is
I mean,
great conversation.
oh yeah, we can go. We did 1 hour and something. So
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It went so fast.
Yeah, I was looking at the timer and like, what? 45
Already
minutes
an hour.
already. Yeah. But it's good. So, thanks so
Yeah.
much for being in the podcast, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you back. So, we'll see. But
Yeah.
we never
I
know.
sure hope so. You never know what'll happen. You
Yeah.
follow God and he'll
Yeah.
take you places you don't expect. So I really hope to come back soon.
Um,
But thank you for having me on the podcast, Paulo, and
nah,
for this conversation. It meant the world to just connect with you and share stories.
it's been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure, and thank you guys for listening to this episode. And if you have any question, you can leave question on Instagram, Paolo and Nina. Paolo and Nina, no Paolo e Nina. It's in English, Paolo and Nina. Or yeah, you can send direct message to us on the Instagram account, so it will be easy for us to reply you back. Next episode will be next month. I don't know who is going to be the guest, but we normally have weird people, so it's going to be weird, somebody weird for sure.
It's perfect.
Yeah, see you next time. Ciao, Maya.
Ciao,
Ciao,
tutti.
ciao.